What just happened between Washington and Ottawa is not normal diplomacy. It's an escalation, and a very public one. Former US President Donald Trump didn't merely pressure Canada, he demanded control over Canadian ports and even water access. That alone crossed a line few US administrations have ever dared to touch. And then came the response. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney didn't negotiate, didn't stall, didn't soften the language. He shut the door completely. No ambiguity, no quiet back channel, just a firm, categorical no. That refusal matters, not because it was dramatic, but because it was unprecedented. For the first time in decades, Canada openly rejected a US demand tied directly to economic coercion. And in doing so, Ottawa didn't just say no to Trump, it challenged the assumption that American leverage in North America is automatic. Almost overnight, the spotlight shifted north, to Churchill, a remote port in northern Manitoba that most global traders had barely noticed before. Now it's becoming central to a quiet but strategic realignment. Manitoba and Saskatchewan have formalized plans to expand Churchill's capacity, not as a symbolic gesture, but as a functional alternative to US-controlled trade corridors. This is Canada signaling something very clear. We will redesign the map if we have to.
Churchill isn't just a port anymore, it's a message. Because what started as a tariff dispute has now turned into something deeper, a battle over sovereignty, influence, and who sets the rules. Washington believed tariffs and ultimatums would force compliance. Instead, they triggered resistance. Markets noticed immediately. Shipping routes adjusted, confidence wobbled. For decades, US ports were seen as unavoidable gateways of global commerce, symbols of stability, scale, and predictability. Now that image is cracking. Container bookings are slipping. Cranes sit idle in yards that were once congested. Shipping companies quietly reroute toward Canadian alternatives, not out of ideology, but risk management. And that's the real damage. Tariffs meant to protect US industry have done the opposite, raising costs, frightening buyers, and injecting uncertainty into a system that runs on trust. The American trade machine didn't collapse, but it no longer looks unshakable. And when global trade stops trusting predictability, power starts moving elsewhere.
In global markets, perception is power, and right now, perception is moving fast. As uncertainty spreads across the American trade system, Canada has done something remarkably disciplined. It hasn't bragged, it hasn't taunted. It has simply positioned itself as reliable. That alone is enough. Ports that once played secondary roles, Churchill, Montreal, Vancouver, are now being treated by global shippers as preferred gateways. Not because Canada is bigger, but because it looks predictable. Churchill, in particular, tells the story. Billions of dollars have quietly modernized the port, expanded storage, upgraded rail links, faster Arctic access. For Europe and parts of Asia, this means shorter routes, fewer choke points, and less political risk. Grain, coal, rare minerals critical for clean energy and defense manufacturing, they're moving north, steadily, contract by contract. Meanwhile, many American ports look strangely subdued, not collapsed, but hesitant. Ships reroute, volumes thin, insurance premiums creep upward. And here's the thing global supply chains never do. They don't snap back out of nostalgia.
Once routes change, once contracts are signed, once infrastructure is adapted, that market share is gone. Every deal Canada locks in today quietly erodes American dominance tomorrow. Not dramatically, irreversibly. Because in global trade, reliability is currency, and at this moment, Canada holds it. But trade is only half the story. The real fault line, the one that exposed just how deep this crisis runs, is water. As droughts intensify across the American West and South, agriculture strains, power generation tightens, and industrial output falters. Behind closed doors, Washington made its move, seeking access to Canada's vast freshwater reserves. The answer was immediate and final. Prime Minister Mark Carney didn't hedge. He didn't propose studies or joint frameworks. He said no. Because for Canada, water isn't a commodity, it's national security. Control of fresh water means control of food production, energy stability, and industrial continuity. By refusing American access, Ottawa forced an uncomfortable truth into the open. California farmers watched canals run dry.
Arizona's semiconductor plants faced rationing, a nightmare for global tech supply chains. Midwestern steel mills prepared for slowdowns as water-intensive processes came under pressure. This wasn't just a policy dispute anymore. It was an exposure. The denial revealed how dependent the United States had quietly become and how unprepared it was for that dependency to be challenged. The economic shockwaves didn't stop at borders. They rippled through markets, supply chains, and investor confidence. And with every ripple, the humiliation deepened. Not because Canada said no, but because the US had no credible way to force a yes. Not long ago, the United States was the anchor of the global system. The economy, others stabilized around. Today, it's facing something unfamiliar, a neighbor that is neither dependent nor accommodating. The consequences are no longer abstract. Grocery prices rise quietly but relentlessly. Electronics cost more as supply chains fracture. Energy prices spike, feeding inflation across households and industry alike. These aren't temporary shocks, they're symptoms. Canada's grip over critical minerals, energy flows, and export corridors has tightened, and American industries are feeling it. Manufacturing margins thin, input costs climb, competitiveness erodes. Markets respond faster than governments. Investors didn't wait for speeches or summits. They reallocated capital toward Canadian markets seen as calmer, clearer, and less politically volatile. Something once unthinkable now enters serious discussion. Canada shaping global commodity benchmarks. For Washington, that possibility cuts deep. Benchmark power isn't symbolic. It defines pricing, leverage, and influence for decades. Ottawa understands the moment. Canadian officials have stopped softening their language. They speak openly about independence, not as rhetoric, but as policy. This is not about hostility toward the United States. It's about refusal to be absorbed, overshadowed, or quietly managed. Canada is no longer positioning itself as a junior partner. It's behaving like a state that knows its leverage and is willing to use it. And the shift doesn't stop at the border. In Europe and Asia, risk managers are adjusting. Volatile supply chains push them towards stability, not size. Canada offers long-term contracts, predictable regulation, and political continuity. These aren't headline-grabbing announcements. They're quiet realignments, the kind that redraw maps while no one is looking. As those partnerships deepen, the United States finds itself increasingly isolated, not excluded, but no longer central. The era when Washington dictated the rules of global commerce is fading, not with a crash, but with a slow loss of relevance. And the irony is sharp. Tariffs meant to reassert American dominance triggered a backlash that empowered Canada instead. The old North American trade order, stable, US-led, uncontested, is cracking. What's emerging in its place is something calmer, less coercive, and more trusted. A Canada that isn't reacting to pressure, but setting terms. Canada's growing influence doesn't stop at trade or ports. Under Mark Carney's leadership, it has moved decisively into geopolitics. Quietly, deliberately, Canada has deepened engagement with Europe and China, not as a hedge, but as a strategy. These relationships are about securing long-term access, shared infrastructure, and stable resource flows. The message is unmistakable. Canada now controls lifelines, not just markets. And at the center of those lifelines is something more powerful than oil ever was: water. For decades, economic strength was measured in GDP, military reach, or manufacturing output. That era is ending. The United States now faces a stark choice: adapt to a world where Canada sets terms, or continue a slide marked by scarcity, improvisation, and public humiliation. Washington can invest in desalination. It can expand recycling, conservation, and emergency infrastructure. Those efforts may buy time, but without Canadian cooperation, they don't solve the core problem. Drought projections toward 2030 are unforgiving.
Large parts of the American West are already under strain. Agriculture, energy generation, and urban water systems sit on a narrowing margin. This isn't a distant risk, it's a countdown.
The confidence, some would say arrogance, of past decades has given way to a reality the U.S. rarely acknowledged: dependency. And that dependency now runs north. Political frustration is rising on both sides of the border. In Canada, public sentiment has hardened against pressure tactics and perceived entitlement. In Washington, the failure to secure water access has exposed a vulnerability few policymakers ever discussed openly. Canada, meanwhile, is positioning itself as the linchpin of continental stability. Under Ottawa's stewardship, water and critical resources are no longer passive endowments. They are instruments of diplomacy. Europe, facing its own water stress, looks to Canada as a strategic partner. Asia sees opportunity and aligns quietly with Ottawa's long-term vision. This is power exercised without threats, without spectacle. Quiet power. And it's rising. This is no longer a trade dispute. It's a historic redefinition of influence, rooted in sovereignty and environmental control. Water has become the new oil, and Canada sits atop it. As Mark Carney arrives in Washington for talks, the imbalance is impossible to ignore. The humiliation felt in U.S. political circles isn't theatrical, it's structural. For the world, this moment signals something profound. The future of power will belong not to those who command armies or markets alone, but to those who control the resources that make modern life possible.
Once the uncontested power of North America, the United States is now confronting strategic losses, from ports to rivers. Canada's refusal to surrender control has sent a clear message: sovereignty is not negotiable, regardless of pressure or crisis across the border. As Ottawa moves forward with confidence, Washington is left scrambling for costly alternatives. This episode stands as a warning about overreach and about what happens when power assumes compliance instead of earning cooperation. With Mark Carney and Donald Trump holding private talks to ease tariffs, the world is watching closely. Markets are adjusting. Alliances are shifting. The era of unquestioned American control over trade routes and critical resources is ending. Canada's rise as a stable, resource-secure partner marks a new chapter, one where trust and sovereignty matter more than coercion. The balance of power in North America has shifted, and its consequences will shape the region for decades. One reality is now undeniable: the future of continental trade and survival flows through Canadian ports and rivers. Trump's demands were rejected. Canada's borders remain firm. The game has changed, and the reckoning has begun.